I know we're running a bit behind, but quickly move through it. We are fortunate enough to have Amy with us. She has spoken in front of our LEPC a few years ago and done some training here in our EOC as well for business owners, but I'm sure she'll touch upon that and talk to you about the Sierra Tier 2, and she's very knowledgeable.
Thank you. It's nice to be back. Lots of familiar faces all the time, right? You know, it's good stuff. So what I'm going to talk to you about is the work that I do at Barnstable County in the Tier 2 Hazardous Chemical Emergency Reporting Program. This is a program that's been going on at Barnstable County for about 13 years. That's how long I've been there. I'm giving you an update on the hazardous materials compliance from the facilities, not only in Falmouth, but the region for the past calendar year. So I want to kind of explain what sets up an LEPC or an REPC. Why are you even here as an LEPC? It's actually associated with this Tier 2 process. I'm going to give you updates on how the towns did, what's happening with the EPA in terms of enforcement, and then I'm going to give you an overview into what's going to happen next year with the Tier 2 process. So this process that I'm going to explain involves a few bullets. There's a federal regulation that we follow to do this hazardous materials compliance process. I'm going to talk to you about the facility compliance update, how, and most importantly, what I really want to touch on for you is how Falmouth benefits from this process in terms of lower risk, lower cost, in terms of training and other things. And I'm going to touch on how first responders benefit from this information as well in terms of pre-planning. And how can you access the data, which actually we figured out right here in this room at Falmouth Fire several years ago on how to provide this data at no cost for the entire region. We had a brainstorm one day and it worked. And then finally, again, an outlook for next year. So let's get through the boring stuff first. The law, all right? The federal law. And it's pretty elaborate. Sarah, Title 3, 40, CFR, that's Code of Federal Regulation 40. And the parts that we work under for Tier 2 is 355 and 370. Okay, so don't memorize that. There's not a test later. But this, just call this law Sarah Title 3. Okay, Sarah Title 3 mandates that the Regional Emergency Planning Committee, and if we never had an REPC and we were just an LEPC, it would mandate to you that you develop an emergency response plan, review that plan at least once a year, provide information about chemicals in the community to all our emergency planning agencies and our citizens. Now, you don't have to technically do all those mandates because you're signed on as a member of the Regional Emergency Planning Committee. So we provide that service. You're under our umbrella, like all the other towns in the island of Nantucket. So I cover them in this process. Martha's Vineyard does their own thing. If anybody's familiar with Martha's Vineyard, a couple of different emergency planning directors over there, their own politics, they do their own thing. So they do their own Tier 2. This process covers Cape Cod and Nantucket only. So those plans that I'm talking about that we develop with information from this process, we have to have stakeholder participation throughout the year, much like you do at this meeting right here. So most of you have been to an REPC meeting and you know who those people are. They're elected officials, local officials, police, fire, health, civil defense, environmental representation, transportation agencies, utilities, hospital, facility reps is very important. We want them to attend. They're giving us the data. We need them at the meetings so they can get information, network, and improve their pre-planning for their facilities. And if they have extremely hazardous chemicals, let's say I'm a boatyard and I have sulfuric acid and I report that in this process, I'm mandated to attend an REPC meeting at least once a year. The law speaks to that, okay? Finally, we have representation from community groups and the media as well. So it really is the backbone to an REPC. And why is that? What are the planning requirements? Well, what do I glean from these reports that makes it such a backbone to the REPC? Well, first we have facility identification. We understand who's out there and what kind of chemicals they have. What are the transportation routes that the extremely hazardous substances are taking to and from the facilities? Only for the very dangerous chemicals. Now, when it says EHS, extremely hazardous substance, That means it's a chemical with a much higher health and physical hazard, and it's reported at a lower quantity. It puts that facility in a more higher regulatory category because of the danger level for the chemical they're reporting. So in these reports, for those chemicals, we get to understand, where are you getting that chemical delivered? Who's bringing it? How much? How are they transporting it? What type of vehicle? What route are they taking? That's the data that these reports give us. It describes emergency response procedures at the facility and off-site, designates a facility emergency coordinator. So again, if you have an EHS, you're supposed to designate a person in the facility that has written a plan for the facility, is ready to respond to that plan, and that's our go-to person for our fire, our police, health, etc. That person's the main contact. It outlines facility emergency notification procedures and provides that data. It can determine for, let's say, the District 1 hazmat team, it can determine the probable area. They can take the data from this reporting process, load it into another software, and they can do air monitoring. Let's say it's an anhydrous ammonia cloud from a skating rink in Falmouth. The District 1 hazmat team can use this data to track, weather-wise and with other details, how is that cloud going to move? How do they plan a response? What do they do? How do they evacuate? It helps with an incident action plan, okay? So we have that, information. When we have a release or a spill, we can understand what to do in the affected area. It's the backbone, too, because it describes local emergency equipment and options. Sometimes it's not technically equipment. Sometimes it's something oddball, like sand or rock yards that have large amounts of sand. They actually have to report that. Now, those facilities are like, well, that's not a hazardous material. It seems kind of odd. But technically, the EPA, not just the messenger here, they speak for sand as an inhalation hazard, but they also want a quarry or a rock yard like we have in Barnstable. Cape Cod Aggregate reports. They use that information about how much sand they have, and they keep that in that database because if there's a spill, they're able to access that sand to berm up a spill, like they did at the Rotary spill in Orleans, I think it was several years ago. They used some local facility sand to block that spill. So it's actually used for a functional, practical purpose, too. The reports describe persons responsible for that equipment. So we have contacts for that sand or a piece of response equipment. This is indirectly the information provides us training and data and programs for emergency responders and facility workers. I do an incredible amount of training at no charge for our private industry, our municipal facilities, and our first responders. To date, I've probably trained over 2,000 first responders in hazard communication standard training. That's chemical identification, awareness, safety, reading data sheets, labels, understanding the new data system we're using or the new label system we're using in the United States. It's a 2-hour training. I give OEMS and registered sanitarian credit, and it's free. And if you were to pay for that, a typical training like that is $1,200 a session. So that's a pretty good savings for our towns to provide that service by using this data that's reported, okay? So also, I implement methods and schedules for our regional emergency response plans. So we're able to update the plan, and we're able to do our annual exercise as well. So that's a lot of stuff, right? That seems very important. It's very important. But let's go back to a simple thought for the responders in the room as we're talking about chemicals that are reported. And hazmat, it's like, to a lot of people, it's like watching paint dry. I love hazmat. Ask Mel, ask Boyd. I love it. I think it's fascinating. I think it is intriguing, and it is imperative for our first responders, first and foremost, to understand what can happen to them if they respond to a facility and do not know what kind of chemicals are inside and apply the wrong fire extinguishing method. What if the chemical reacts with water and you douse it with water because you never looked at the tier 2? I want to communicate that to you. I want you to look at this information. And I've learned over the years that fire departments are not best friends with the term pre-planning. It's a big snooze to a lot of them. Falmouth might be the exception because we've had some fun conversations in pre-planning. And you're unique in that way. You really do delve in and you care. But it's a constant effort to have different responding agencies understand the benefits of this and to understand just how far-reaching the ramifications of chemicals and chemical accidents are. It's incredible what can happen. And if you don't believe me, just look at Danvers is a perfect example. Does anybody remember what happened in Danvers? This was the night before Thanksgiving. And depending on the reports that you read, basically the neighbors were complaining about the ventilation system. And to give them a break, they had shut down the fans, among other things. When they shut down the fans, there was an accumulation of all of this, the paint residual, the chemicals in the plant. When someone kicked the fans on, there was a reaction, an electric reaction, and then it caused an explosion in Danvers. Now these people are being evacuated, and what I want to just show you is a practical sense. You know, I gave you the law and all the benefits, and we'll go over more things. But as you're watching the slides, just think, do you need the data? And how would it help you if something like this, not maybe at this extreme, but something similar happened in Falmouth? How would this protect you to have this information in advance? What would you do with the information? And if you have these chemical facilities in Falmouth, which you do, is it a liability for your town? If you don't look at this information, you don't apply it, you don't familiarize yourself with these facilities, some of which, let me tell you, have extremely dangerous chemicals. You have a couple of winners in this town, and they're compliant, but they have some interesting stuff there that you should know about. So is it a liability for your municipal facility? We should be very, very conscientious of that. We don't want liabilities for our town. We want to protect our municipal resources and our facilities. Does your fire department conduct hazmat pre-planning? Well, I just answered that. Sure we do. When Mel needs me and we need to talk about a new issue, a new reg, something related to hazmat, it is easy for me to call down here and have that discussion or come and meet with you. You're super receptive to that, always have been, probably always will be. And we have very productive conversations because that help through me is free, right? Okay, I like this slide. It's unfortunate what's happening, but it emphasizes the point. Several years ago when we added yacht yards, boat yards, marinas, why did they report under Tier 2? This is Crosby in 2003. $3 million in damages. Now, 2003. So today, what do? Like triple that, probably, in damages? But this is why it's important for Cape Cod and Nantucket marinas and boat yards to report. Fuel. Where's the fuel stored? Shout it out. Where's the fuel stored? In the boats. What are the boats made of? Fiberglass. Is that a deadly combination? You bet. You bet. It catches on fire. What's in the middle of the yacht yard? Where is the sulfuric acid stored? In the batteries. Where are the batteries? Sometimes in a big room, all plugged in with the owner's names on it. Should we know this? How often does that happen? How many months out of the year would you have storage? That's typical. Typical storage. Dozens and dozens. I would put a number, if I had to put a number, and I should have looked this up. How many boat yards on Cape Cod? Probably 80 that report this. And that sulfuric acid is all collected, usually right in the middle of a boat yard. And that's your problem when you show up. So this, I want to know that. Point is, I want to know that. All right, so compliance. It's not enforcement, this process. Enforcement goes to a bigger beast. And some of us know that beast. And he is a very different kind of a person. Once you get to enforcement at the federal level, it's very black and white, and they're very good at their job. But where I am only dealing with 400 plus facilities, he is dealing with over 4,000 in Massachusetts alone, and then the whole New England region. So when enforcement comes, they don't care what your excuses are. If you were having a bad day, if you didn't get around to it, could you have an extension on the report? It doesn't work like that. But when you work with me, it's like, yay, it's Tier 2 time, let's get together, let's find out what's going on, let's get this done, let's get it off your desk, let's get you some training. And that's the joy of compliance. And I've been on the enforcement. I would rather be in compliance, okay? So what is compliance? It's facilities like in your town, if they're covered under SARA Title III, they're required to submit what is technically called, it's very long, remember this is government speak, okay? A hazardous chemical emergency report, Tier 2. We call them Tier 2s, all right? So in that Tier 2, it's one report, it's once a year to 3 agencies. It comes to me at the REPC, it goes to the fire department, and it goes to the state, to MEMA. And everybody knows what MEMA is, right? Anybody not know? Okay. So that's enforced by the EPA. I have a special little nugget for you about the EPA later on in the presentation. What's going to happen to the EPA? We're all wondering, right? So I will give you a highlight straight from the horse's mouth in Boston later on. Report threshold. So I'm a mom and pop shop. I have some cans of oil and some WD-40. Am I a tier 2 reporter if I've got those little scraps and pieces of chemicals? No. Your reporters under this process are heavy hitters, 10,000 pounds, okay? I'm going to pass this around. I brought it with me so you can get an idea. This is just a very basic reference sheet. And what it shows is typically on Cape Cod, what some of the chemicals are that are reported. What are the gallons? What is the chemical abstract system number? It's like an ID number. But it shows equivalencies and thresholds. Now the ones in bold are extremely hazardous substances, so the threshold for reporting are very low. But then at the top, we have two of the most common reporting. So if I'm a facility and I have to report gas, that means that I have 1,600 gallons or more stored at my facility. If I have diesel, it's 1,400 or more. That's the conversion, okay? So this just gives you an idea of what kind of chemicals are being reported and what are the thresholds that they have to report.
Is that amount stored or is that annual usage?
That's stored and used any one day in a calendar year. At a facility, has to be reported, okay? So thresholds, that's going around. So let's get to the meat of it. I've been a busy person. What have I done for you lately? Well, let's talk about that. When I started this particular part of my job, it was in '05, and I was handed 56 facility reports in a plastic bag that were hanging on a cubicle wall. Awesome, right? That was a great way to end the job. Now, fast forward 12 years, I have 434 facilities. How did she do it? Because I just got that magic, folks. I got that magic. It's all these years of communication, collaborating with my firefighter colleagues, a lot of drive-bys, going, you know, on a Saturday, like, ooh, boat storage. I wonder if they report. But I don't mean it in the way of, let me find them on Monday and shake them down. I look at this as the more facilities that you're assisting and you're helping with compliance, trust me, the more you're keeping out of trouble. The more we're able to lower our liability, our risk, our cost, our losing our businesses, our injuring our first responders, and I'll give you that. So 434 today. I couldn't believe it when I saw the number this year. I was like, no wonder I never came out of my office for 2 months. 164 of these facilities have an EHS, okay? So we have 164 facilities in this region that are under more regulatory obligation, have much more dangerous chemical storage, and should be paid attention to by people like you in our LAPC. 1% of the filers were non-compliant. They wouldn't file. That was 4 out of 430. Yeah, all right, that's not bad. Getting better every year. 2% filed late. 9 facilities out of 434 filed late. Why do I care? Can you tell that I care? Because I do. Because I enjoy it. Because I don't want the facility to file late or not at all. Because there's a lot of heavy penalties behind this, up to jail time behind this if you don't do it. And I'll show you a fun slide about that. Approximately 100 new facility filings came on board in the past year. 100. What happened all of a sudden? Well, we've talked about the state implemented a new online database. And my theory is that with them choosing to use this database, it has floated many new facilities to the surface that we did not have knowledge of before. Before, it was a very manual collection and putting them into Cameo, which I still do. But with the state's database, my cross-checking ability has increased. One good thing about Manager, right? So that's enabled us to understand a more precise number of who's reporting for Cape Cod. By the way, this doesn't include Nantucket. There's 27 more over there. So, finally, workshops. I didn't do 41 workshops. That's 41 people. I could never do 41 workshops. That would be horrible. Office visits, I had 64 people. It was like a rotating, like a doctor's office. Next, 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 right? And then emails and phone calls. Well, emails alone were probably over 100, describing to people what to do, guiding them through the process, and then phone calls helping people finish the reports. All right. So after it's all done and you get the numbers, what does it mean to Falmouth? What does it mean? Well, how do we empower ePrep in a town like Falmouth? How does this benefit you in that way? These reports filed under Sarah Title III, they provide this updated information. They tell us, they tell me, they tell you what chemicals are stored, where they're stored, how they're stored. Did the facility bring in a new chemical that you guys need to know about? Did they get rid of something? Did they increase a quantity? Did they lower a quantity? Did they change a process? Are they mixing something that they weren't before? The report will tell you that. How do we lower risk in our town, in our region? Well, like I said, pre-planning and utilizing the data helps our responding agencies form an incident action plan quickly and efficiently. We have to have that information. If your chief is your IC or it's your most knowledgeable person in hazmat, we want them to form that action plan quickly and efficiently, and they can use this data in pre-planning to do so. This is a lifesaver, and we can understand, again, remember I said, we want water on a sulfuric acid fire, yes or no? No, no, and if you want to know why, you can Google it. Water on a sulfuric acid fire is a bad idea. So if we're going to a boatyard and there's the battery storage room, are you guys going to run over and dump water in the battery storage room? Probably not a good idea, right? And you know that from the Tier 2 report. We can prevent injury, we can lower or eliminate any kind of permanent disability, and our first responders will not die if they utilize this information. How do we lower risk for businesses, facilities, and the residents in Falmouth? This pre-planning data allows us to prevent injury or killing a facility worker. We can spare our workers and protect them. Not only that, we can prevent injury for our surrounding residents. We can prevent death for our surrounding residents. Do you think an anhydrous ammonia leak has the potential to kill surrounding residents? Kids in the rink? People in the parking lot? It's pretty dangerous stuff, right? One whiff? You have that in your town, yes? Okay? So if we pre-plan, we can do prevention. We can prevent the destruction and elimination of our business. We can preserve our economy by pre-planning and mitigating and eliminating a spill or a release in Falmouth. We can prevent destruction of surrounding facilities and homes, like Danvers. Danvers was interesting. Do you know why so many people, they survived? There were no deaths, minor injuries. Why was it? Does anybody know? The explosion was in the middle of the night. You know what everybody was doing the night before Thanksgiving? And when you're sleeping, you're laying down. By the grace, right? You're laying down, the fire, or the explosion, the impact blew out the windows. What did it do? Went over everybody. That's why people survived. You know? So that destruction of facilities and homes, that's no joke. There are houses and residential communities surrounding these facilities. We can prevent them from being destroyed. And the destruction of the local environment, which is essential on Cape Cod. Chemical releases into the groundwater, is that a good thing for Cape Cod? It's the worst thing for Cape Cod. Why? We're on a sole source aquifer. We need to protect that, yes? All right, so how does this compliance improve the reporting process from the town? What is it about my program? I'm really big on accuracy. Why am I big on accuracy, especially with municipal facilities? Liability goes down. Mess up your report, false information, careless information, you can get dinged for that by the EPA. It also is not helping the responder. It's actually hurting the responder to carelessly and inaccurately report. It doesn't matter what section. If you mess up a phone number that's a 24-hour phone number, that's a problem. And you can get dinged for that. And if you think the EPA doesn't check these reports, they do. He's actually pretty good. He'll come down now, and he has such confidence in our region that he'll call and say, I don't want you to be worried, but we're going to such and such a school and we're going to clean up their chemical lab today and their chemical storage. It's not an enforcement action. We're just helping them rearrange the lab. So if you hear we're down here, it's not to enforce. Like, who gets a call like that from the EPA? That's the relationship that we've built with them. Have you seen an EPA Tier 2 workshop in this region lately? No, that's because he defers them to me. It's wonderful. He knows that this region is covered and we have great compliance. We're helping them, you know? So that accuracy is key. It keeps the EPA over the bridge because we have good compliance. We avoid enforcement on our facilities and our private businesses. We provide up-to-date regulatory information through this process. So as I'm helping people with the report, I can say, well, this year, this and this is new. Let's do it this way. Do you have this? Let me ask you this. There are regulatory questions embedded in these reports, and I interpret those for the facility, which streamlines their compliance. Am I a TRI facility? I don't know. Call me up, I explain it, we figure it out. That's part of the process, right? Communication on what new local data is required. Every year the EPA says, this year we're going to ask for this, or this year we're going to ask for a little bit of information here. Fire departments can ask for new data. I can ask for new data. The law speaks to that. So I am asking for new data. Get ready, I'm going to tell you what it is, new data. It encourages collaboration. Well, I think Falmouth is the classic example of that. Because if there isn't a more positive collaboration than down here, I mean, outside of Nantucket, you know, because they're so isolated, it's great to come down here because we understand this process. We collect this data, we work together to, you know, really empower the process. And that collaboration is between REPC, the towns, the facilities, and private industry. That report gets better every year. I have very positive experiences. How do I know? Because I have 434 facilities, and they're not fighting me on this. They're actually, I have people calling me in December for appointments. The reporting season doesn't start until January, and people enjoy coming in, they enjoy getting it done, and I don't make it painful for them, okay? Because I really like helping everybody stay under the radar, okay? So how do we lower cost in Falmouth? Okay, well, we're reducing the expense for your town facilities. Because if your town facilities are filing a Tier 2 and they're coming to me, they're saving $200 to $500 per report. So let's say I'm a department in the town of Falmouth and I have 5 facilities under my department. I'm saving $200 to $500 per facility each year in filing by coming to me and having me walk you through the process. And where am I getting all my information and all my data? Straight from the EPA and the Hazmat Tech Conference in September. Previous September. So I'm ready to go. I know what I'm doing, I've been doing it a long time, I follow the law, and I help you through it. And you're saving money. I don't know how you can beat that, right? And I don't know why you would pay to do that filing either. We reduce the town and business potential liability. Potential liability, that's kind of legalese, right? The legalese for heavy fines, citations, legal action. It can even extend into firefighter or private facility union grievances, enforcement action. Oh, is anyone familiar what happens when the EPA enforces? You know what they do? It's like a never-ending process. It's just painful. They'll come down, and no disrespect to our friend Len, but they have a process because there's so many people they're dealing with. Like I said, it's very black and white. When you get to enforcement, it's a whole new game. This goes bye-bye, and they open a folder on you, and they leave it open, and they'll inspect, and they'll come back, and they'll keep checking in on you, and they'll come after you again and again. And if you keep messing up and you don't do what they say, then they involve their legal department, which is a whole nother animal that you need to navigate. And if you think any of that is easy or free or seamless or just such a pleasant experience, it just doesn't work like that. It's not set up like that because this is serious. A hazmat violation is very serious to them. And the amount of damage, the amount of destruction, consider West Texas. I don't know if that picture came up yet, but West Texas, the facility manager was lying about what he had. he didn't report for 2 or 3 years, and by the time he did it after his facility caught fire, and 15 people were killed, and I believe it was 11 of those were firefighters, volunteer. Now, why did 11 firefighters die in a fire at a fertilizer plant? Well, the guy stockpiled ammonium nitrate. Ammonium nitrate is a fertilizer. He's a wholesale fertilizer company, so he has to report, okay? He's not an agway. They're exempt. They're retail. He's wholesale. So he has to do this report. For some reason that no one could figure out at the time, he's stockpiling ammonium nitrate. It's used in not just land or fertilizer application, but it's used in land clearing, controlled bits, blow in place. So you would do mining or clearing, and you would put it in the ground and set it all up, and you'd have a charge, and you would blow it up. And under very controlled circumstances, you would use ammonium nitrate. Well, the neighbors were complaining, I smell ammonia. Why do we keep smelling ammonia? That's really strong. So in between miscommunications and not really targeting what this guy was doing, he had a fire. You know, the worst case scenario. So when the call comes in, it's a fire. But by the time they got there, the fire spread to the part of the warehouse where the nitrate was. And what happens when nitrate burns? It's like a nuclear explosion. It looks like it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and this was in 2013, on April 17th. So we had those fatalities, and then you had 160 people that were injured, had to be triaged, and most of them were elderly. Now, do you know why? Because across the street from the fertilizer plant was a very large elderly home, and all those walls and structures were blown out, and those people were injured. So they triaged them, and as they triaged them, the fire is burning, and the wind shifts. And you're triaging 160 elderly people, mostly elderly people. You've got 11 of your colleagues that are missing or dead. You have 3 additional people that are dead, 3 or 4 dead. And they had to move the whole triage area because they were afraid that the inhalation hazard from the ammonia was going to kill everybody. Imagine the chaos. Now, I said late reporting over this compliance process about the EPA and what does this mean when the EPA is enforcing? Well, how do you get jail time? You go home that night after all this happens at your fertilizer plant, and you file your Tier 2, and you put in the anhydrous or the ammonium nitrate that you had, and you send it. And then what happens when you send it? It's time date stamped. So they knew what he did, and it's just terrible. It's comical and it's illogic. But it's terrible because all that destruction, and what did it all boil down to? In the end, what was it all about with this guy? Arson. That's what they just figured out. I've been following this, can you tell? I've been following this story for like 3 years. But it's the prime example of why we don't negate this process in our towns. Look at the potential that we could have from someone's greed or negligence. And the ramifications of that, that wasn't just the facility. He ruined, he decimated an entire town. And I guarantee you, he's in jail. He's in federal prison. Guarantee you. That's how you get jailed in the Tier 2 process. No better example. All right, so let's get a little upbeat. Let's move away from West Texas, okay? How does the compliance process benefit the region? Well, in the upper left, that's the training for the District 1 hazmat team, using the Tier 2 data and bringing them up to speed on different ways to access the data and do all these things that I'm talking about for their pre-planning and their response. District 1 hazmat team covers Southeast New England, covers your town, yeah? In the upper right, it allows us to figure out grant money for resources, spill response equipment, programs, training. We can use it in that way. We can navigate those needs through the data. That's the District 1 hazmat team in class. That's a colleague of mine teaching. He's a retired fire captain from Rhode Island, and he's teaching them the EPA database of Cameo. That's where they can do those, follow those air monitoring clouds and do mapping and things like that. And then in the lower right, the data, we use it for our annual hazmat exercise. And this one was in Wellfleet last year. So for our fire departments and our health departments and our And even police, if you had a reason to go to a facility to work collaboratively with them, to help them and to understand their chemical storage for emergency response and planning. This law has these sections that empower you to do so. There's only really technically 2 towns on Cape Cod that have an ordinance that allows enforcement or inspection for hazardous materials. It's Barnstable and Yarmouth. Everybody else probably defers to fire or defers to the county, or it doesn't do anything at all. The federal law, which supersedes everything, the CFR Part 370 says, here's 6 sections, fire department, take these, and they basically say, I can come to your facility, private or public, at any time, and I can work with you at looking at your facility, walking through, and assessing your chemical storage for hazmat pre-planning and response. And it is meant, in my interpretation of it, I am saying I use these sections to get this information when the very few times facilities have refused to report, and it's happened. I don't want to tell you that. It's a trade secret. I don't want to say this. I don't want to give you that information. Yeah, you do want to give it to me, because these sections say you have to, and why? But if you wanted to work with your local business and collaborate and do walkthroughs and build that report and understand, and then all of a sudden you build that trust and the facility's calling you and going, we've had a change, you need to know about it, or I've got this new chemical, or I need to get your advice on this new way to store a chemical. This facilitates that. It enables that, okay? The bottom is most important. You must provide the fire department with information about the specific locations of hazardous chemicals at your facility. I don't have to do this. Yes, you do. But there's good reasons for it, right? We facilitate that planning, So how do we access this data? Well, it's fabulous information. How can you get your hands on the data? There's 2 ways. I want you to contact me either way. At the end of the presentation, I can give you my card, and you can understand how to log in to see Tier 2 Manager, and that is, you will only see Cape Cod. Well, why is that? Well, a couple years ago, and we had big fun navigating this, the state decided that rather than using the EPA database, they wanted to use something that was online and a lot more hands-off for them. They didn't want to really dive into Cameo too much. They didn't want to train and learn it. So they chose Tier 2 Manager. Many states do this. The problem that existed was that for Falmouth or Mashpee or Barnstable or Sandwich or the rest of the Cape or Nantucket, for them to see just their town's data, you'd have to pay $1,500 a year for information that legally you should have access to at any time at no cost. So this just confused us. So we did a little research here at Falmouth Fire, and we figured out a way to share that information with our region at no cost, saving each town $1,500. And if you want access to that, I will be happy to speak to you after the presentation on how to do that, if you're a responding agency and you need that access. And then there's the Cameo system, which is the EPA system. I can put those reports in Cameo for you. If you're a Cameo enthusiast, if you use the air monitoring and mapping program and the database, I can do that as well for the first responders, okay? So there's 2 ways to access that data, plus the fire department gets it in hard copy too, for every one of their facilities. So this enforcement under the CFR, remember I said I was going to give you a little information about the EPA? Well, under this new administration, you see a lot of executive orders and a lot of corresponding bills coming forward to get rid of things, to simplify government. And I understand that. I understand the motivation. This is a bill called H.R. 861. And if I was you, I would pay attention to H.R. 861. Because it has one sentence, to abolish the Environmental Protection Agency by December 31st, 2018. That's it. That's the whole bill. It's been introduced. If you Google H.R. 861, you can actually get on a notification list to see when it's amended, when it's voted on, or what the status is. So let's say next year it gets approved, and they do that one sentence. They abolish the EPA. What happens? What happens to me? What happens to the Tier 2 process? Not to worry. That's what happens. This CFR, SARE Title III, doesn't go away. Doesn't go away. It all transfers to the state. And they have to find the money and the manpower to enforce all these EPA regulations. And that means that you'll have 50 different states with 50 different interpretations of these CFRs. It doesn't go away. It doesn't do a thing to Tier 2. It just transfers all that work, effort, and funding to the state level. Okay? So the EPA is funded through tomorrow. I guess I'll be making a phone call up to our friend Len and asking him, you're funded till April 28th, now what? Because there's a lot of changes going on, yes? So we need to pay attention. This affects not just this process, which, you know, is going to affect the oversight, but abolishing the EPA affects quite a bit, you know, of these different regulations, programs, and things like that. So we want to pay attention to that. I'm not going to go through this painstakingly long slide, but it gives you kind of a summary of what happens if you're that guy in town of West, Texas. What happens to you? Are there violations? Sure there are. 10 to 75 grand a day per violation per day. Now imagine a municipal facility not complying with this process and then facing fines like that for non-compliance. That's a hit on the town, right? All the more reason that this process makes sense to me as a service to the towns in Nantucket. We're protecting them from this type of financial liability. We see criminal penalties of 50 grand or 5 years in prison. Where do you think that manager from West Fertilizer is? He's still in jail, I bet. Section 326, if a citizen moves to Falmouth and learns that a facility hasn't been reporting, they can go after them legally for not complying with this law. This is a community right to know act. Emergency planning, community right to know. So citizens can enact litigation if they're not compliant. They have to prove it, right? And then we all can sue each other. The State Emergency Response Commission, LEPC, local governments, institutes can have action against owners and operators for failure to comply. Everybody can sue everybody, right? It's litigious. Why is it so litigious? It was established in '86. There's a lot of information here. I'm a chemical company. I make a lot of money. I don't really want to tell you the ingredients to some of my top-selling chemicals. You think I'm going to come at you with my lawyers? You bet. And that's been happening since '86. So if you ever can't sleep, I highly recommend that you download CFR 40 and read it because it's been pulled apart by legalese and lawyers fighting to get exempt from this process. It's just madness, right? It's turned into such a thing. But I like to think that I've simplified it a little to show the usefulness of this. So what's going to happen next year? When I start the reporting next year, I am going to be asking for new site plans. We haven't updated them in 6 years. And I want to preface this with Bourne PD was wonderful. They were the first to report. They reported in December, even before the season started. But they have a very old site plan, and here it is. So if you're a first responder, and this is what you see, is this helpful to you? It's just an old Google Earth, really ancient Google Earth picture that says Bourne PD fuel tanks on a street somewhere. Okay, so we need to update. No disrespect to Bourne PD, but it's an old site plan, and they just wanted to kind of pinpoint where it was at the time. So more detail will be asked for in those site plans, and they'll be attached to all the plans for first responder access. Yes?
Do you require a engineering drawing of a facility with the areas clearly noted inside as to where the hazardous material is stored?
Yes, but it doesn't have to be. A lot of people were worried about expense because I already introduced this year and gave them 2 reporting full calendar years to complete this. So I got a lot of concerns about that's going to be very expensive and this and that. A lot of facilities already have current site plans or just facility layouts that show us the data that's required. I gave them a guideline list. So I also found free software that I use to help facilities construct these site plans to save them money. Because I realized when you introduce anything like this isn't just saying, give me an additional phone number. This is work for a lot of facilities. In places like the Hui, I mean, they were like, wait a minute. And I said, no, some facilities' current site plans are right on the money. Not everybody's gonna have to do this. But the more detailed that people can give us, the better. And if they get stuck, I have a water department. She has reporting on 22 pump stations. It's calm water. So we're gonna be using this software to do site plans for each of the pump stations. There's always a way. If you have the knowledge and the initiative, and you know the purpose of this is to save the towns money and lower their liability and increase their compliance, there's a way to do that. And I figure out a way. I don't just make a suggestion and go, you figure it out. That's not how you should be doing business and government ever. You're supposed to be providing a service to the town. So that's how I navigate it, by finding that software and helping people. Okay, that is my presentation. I'm very happy to bring you that information. Do we have any additional questions? I hope you're as enthused about hazmat now as I am. I bet you never figured, right? No questions? Silence is acceptance. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
We do subcommittee reports. Helen, do you want to start with START?
The drill last weekend went well. We had 14 of our CERT members, and Barnstable County Sheriff's Office sent us some CERT members. It was a learning experience, but we all picked up a little something that we can improve on, but it went very well, and everyone worked well together.
So just to give a heads up to those that weren't aware, the Regional Emergency Planning Committee, the shelter director, Phil Burt, reached out and said, we've done a sort of a mock drill at all of our 4 other regional shelters, and we'd like to utilize Falmouth as a platform this year. We always do an annual walkthrough. Our walkthrough consists of bringing in all of the stakeholders in our sheltering plan, Red Cross, MRC, AmeriCorps, et cetera, and just walk through and introduce new members to where things are kept, and just a very brief overview of our shelter operation. Well, this time we had role playing, and everyone sort of got an opportunity to, put the cots together. DART, their new members, had an opportunity to put their animal shelter piece together, and it was a great learning tool. And we had members from the LEPC who went, and we also, and I'll have Phil speak or Henry speak a little bit about their piece for Aries, but there were a lot of learning pieces, and we do what we do well, and the REPC likes to use Falmouth as a role model because of the plans that we have, speaking of how important plans are to lay out our shelter, and it's a fabulous facility, and we have a great working relationship with the school department as well, because we couldn't do it without them also. So amazing participation from our CERT members. Very, very pleased for them to be there. And I don't know if Henry can speak a little bit about the radio component that was tested as well.
Right, we have a station, an amateur radio station up here in the EOC, and that was manned by 2 people who are both in here. And we also have a station at the shelter. The station at the shelter generally communicates with the MAC in Barnstable, and we were able to do that using frequencies and equipment that we don't often use, and it worked out very well. So it was a good exercise for us, and I thought the whole thing went really well. I was very pleased with it.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks for your participation. Great. Any questions on that? Communications subcommittee?
Really due to report at this time.
Great, excellent. So just a reminder, and you see it at the bottom of your agenda, next month is really important for us. May 25th is our next meeting. That is our tabletop. Just to refresh your memory, we have a program that was initiated by a senior at Mass Maritime Academy, and that's going to be an amazing event as well. I did put out an RSVP. It is, there are a lot of players involved in this exercise. and a lot of players that are, you know, specifically involved in the model that we have in place. But if you do have a desire to come and be an observer, we do welcome that as well. Just kind of give me a heads up so that I know that you're coming, so I can just maintain and manage the number that we have of people. Other than that.
I'll be evaluating.
Yes, Amy is an evaluator. That brings up a point also, and if you are interested in being an evaluator, I do have another evaluator spot that we're looking to fill, and we'll see if we can't, you know, make a match that way.
Good, I'm looking
Can
forward.
work with Amy.
Yeah, MMA is great. This is their new direction. They normally do the regional exercise through the Maritime, but they divided it up among their cadets. They do a special course they have to apply to get into, and this is the approach they're taking. They piecemealed it out to several different exercises to serve several different towns, which I thought was brilliant. So it's smaller scale, but then it serves you more individually, and it'll be neat to see how the new process goes. It's good for the town, it's free, and then the cadets learn, and everybody wins.
Right. That's great.
Yeah.
And just to close, I want to thank Amy again. And when she says that you know, she works, and you saw the number up there, she works very hard in enabling a community to be in compliance. She really does. And over the years, we've fostered an amazing relationship with her. And it has branched out to our pre-planning. And Deputy Smith could speak to this, because when we get the plans for where these hazmat the facilities send us plans for where the hazardous materials are located. Those plans are downloaded into our computers that go on site whenever we have a fire or any other issue. The deputy pulls those plans up and knows exactly what they're dealing with and where everything is located. And it also opens up training opportunities for us with our stakeholders. We've done training at HUI, we've done training at MBL, we've done walkthroughs with their facilities, and it's really an amazing learning tool for our first responders. Great, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.